Okay, good morning, everybody. Why don't we start the new Sif Yud Gimel today? First of all, I hope Shavuot Tov. Hope everyone had a lovely weekend. And why don't we get started now? So the last thing that we were discussing, just to remind you, is that we were noticing in a tshuva from Rav Gistetner, a contemporary 20th century, late 20th century tshuva, that there is this tension between, on the one hand, it's a free enterprise, open market, as far as opening different kinds of businesses, especially when it comes to the provision of spiritual or religious services. But at the same time, even when it comes to the right of everyone to open up their own yeshiva or their own shul, there's a certain limitation in that if you are enterprising off of someone else's hard work, and that the only reason that you can open up your yeshiva or your shul or whatever it is because of the hard work of the already established entity, and by your opening up, you're causing real damage and financial harm to the original entity. So then Rav Gistetner felt that this was usher, or that this was halachically problematic to do that, and that there would have to be some kind of financial reckoning between the two parties. Another thing that we had discussed at the end of our discussion, in talking about when a tutor is allowed to be groomed by a second balabayas, to take him away from the first balabayas where he's established, even though we had said that this is permitted, because the second balabayas can say, I can't find, anyone as good as you to teach my child Torah. The Imrei Yaakov, or the Biurim of the Imrei Yaakov, had brought this dispute in the latter-day poskim, whether this concept applies exclusively to religious services, or whether it applies to all marketable services. So, for example, does this apply to a situation where I notice that my competitor has a very effective, trustworthy manager, let's say an office manager, and am I allowed to go over to that office manager and say, I'd like you to come and work for me, and I'll pay you more money? Is there anything unethical or halachically problematic of poaching an employee from a competitor? And the Biurim's conclusion was that it is halachically problematic, that the only time that a dispensation is offered to hire one tutor and lure them away from another family is when the claim can be made that for religious matters, this is I need this for my child. And so for my child's spiritual sustenance, a special dispensation is granted for someone to even poach away a tutor. I'm not sure that I would feel particularly comfortable with it in any event, but at least that's a limitation. So I want us to keep those ideas in mind. There's a lot of gray still within all of these areas, but certainly just raising these issues should sensitize us to the issue of what it means to exploit or enterprise off of someone else's hard work, and to poach away an employee or a worker from someone else. So Yud Gimel, Yisrael sheyesh lo nochri makiro, shehu nosei v'nosein imo tamid, o malveh oto beribit tamid. So now here's a new halacha having to do with a Gentile. Okay, let's say Ruvain does regular business with a particular non-Jew. And either they have a regular transactional relationship, a business relationship, where Ruvain is the vendor or Ruvain is the buyer, either way, or Ruvain this non-Jew is a customer of Ruvain's, for money lending, because money lending was a big business. It was a big, almost, it was a very big Jewish business in the Middle Ages, especially because Jews were not able to get into other industries, especially agricultural industries. So this was a typically Jewish way of making money, that Jews would be money lenders. And of course, we know the negative stereotypes that are associated with that, but they're completely unfair. So in any event, that Ruvain has an established business relationship, a financial relationship with a particular Gentile. So yesh omrim shemutar Yisrael acher la'asok imoto enu Yehudei ulahalvoto ve'en bo mishum hasagas gevul al pi svara harishona shenisbar l'mayla. So there are some who wish to say that it is permitted for Shimon, another Jew living in the community, to go over to that goy, to that non-Jew, and to say to him, "Come, I'll lend you money, and I'll do better on the interest rate. I won't charge you as much interest. Or come, I'll sell you the same widgets that Reuven is selling you. I'll sell it to you at a better rate." And some say that that's permitted, and there's no prohibition of hasagas gevul using the latter opinion that we had seen previously, as far as what the definition of hasagas gevul is. And we had learned, according to that one opinion, that hasagas gevul only applies where there's equal opportunity to get, or there's the same opportunity to get another customer somewhere else. But if it's something that's coming from hefker, if it's a one-of-a-kind item, and it's a hefker item, and Reuven's walking down the street and he's about to pick it up, Shimon is allowed to swoop down and pick it up. We had seen that argument before, and the analogy is being made between this non-Jew and hefker. And we'll see why, but I'll just speak it out outside just to give you just sort of like a sketch of this. The argument is that a non-Jew's money is like hefker, in the sense that there is no clear association or guarantee between the Gentile's money and any particular Jew. And that seems to be the argument. It's not like it's an established business relationship which has any solidity to it whatsoever. And as a result, it's like an item that's lying on the street, and anyone can come by and take advantage of that hefker item. So that's the argument of those who say that it's permitted to do this. V'yesh osrin, but the other opinion is that it's asur. He says shekeven she'enu Yehudi hu makiro shel zeh, and the reason is because since the non-Jew already has a relationship with Reuven, the ragil la'asok imo tadir, and he has this. There's a regular transactional relationship that occurs on a regular basis. V'hayisrael batuach bo, and the Jew relies on that for his livelihood. Areza ki'ilu ba ha'esek liyado shel Yisrael. Then you don't look at it as like as hefker money that anyone can come along and grab it, but rather you look at it as if it's already in the possession of the Yisrael. And if someone were to come along, it's like oni hamahapech bechorara, like the poor person who's already started prospecting on the pile of garbage. If someone were to come along and try to entice the non-Jew to do business with him instead, you're causing a stoppage of this person's livelihood. You're stopping his livelihood, Reuven's livelihood, by Shimon, by you taking away this non-Jew, who's the source of his income. Va'afilu Yisrael shehu bal malacha, v'ragil la'asot tamid etzel eini Yehudi echad, asur la'acher lahozil hasechar kedei sheyitin lo ha'einu Yehudi ma'amalacha la'asot. And even if the Ruvain, the first Jew, is simply a service provider. It's not that they have a transactional relationship as far as goods, but let's say that Ruvain is a laborer. He has a regular transactional relationship based on not goods, but rather services. And he normally does that kind of work for the Gentile person who seeks that kind of labor. It would be usher, according to this second opinion, for Shimon to go ahead and offer his services for a lower amount so that the Gentile hire him instead. Hoil v'zehu ragil in eni Yehudi zemi kavar ubatuach bo. Since Ruvain has already established this as his labor contract, and he relies on the work that he's getting from the non-Jew, and his whole livelihood is dependent upon him getting employment from this non-Jew. And therefore, for Shimon to come along and to try and hire himself out instead of Ruvain is taking away Ruvain's livelihood. And therefore, according to this opinion, any situation where Ruvain is reliant on a certain income stream, and he receives this habitually with regularity, and in that case, asur la'acher lemon'o mimenu shehu keposek chayav, then it is absolutely asur, according to this opinion, for a second guy, Shimon, to come along and try to usurp that revenue stream for himself, even though he could argue, well, it's hefker, it's an open market. Okay, uli inyan halacha zet talui b'minhag mikamot. Now, as far as how we paskin, since I've presented to you two different opinions, it really depends on the minhag of where you live. A lot of this is based upon convention. Yesh mekomot nohagin lahakil kisvara harishana, v'yesh mekomot nohagin lahachmir kisvara ha'acharona. There are some places where they basically make it a free-for-all, and they say it's every man for himself. And if it's very hard, and also like it could be, it's based on the minhag of the place is based upon the nature of the relationships that exist between the Jewish and non-Jewish communities. It could be that in situations where the non-Jews are upstanding people, they are loyal to the people that they hire, then it is criminal for Shimon to come along and try to take away Ruvain's livelihood. But there could also be places where the relationships between Jews and non-Jews is hostile. There's not a good relationship, and the Gentiles are likely to, at a whim, give the business to the highest bidder, no matter what. Even if Shimon were not to come along, there would be perhaps another Gentile who would come along and try to hire himself out. So in that kind of situation, perhaps it would be permitted for Shimon to come along and try to take the business, because he could tell Reuven, there's nothing solid that you have here. Every week they're tendering out their business and trying to get the highest bidder, the best bid. So v'yesh makomos nogim hachmir kisvar chana, but there are also places where the minig is to be machmir. The Imrei shamayim yachmir la'atzmo b'chol makom. And a God-fearing person should be machmir for himself in all places. In other words, you should always try to be as stringent as possible. And then the rest of the sif, we're going to be talking about setting up shop, setting up a business that you put up a shingle and you let people know that you're open for business. That is different. And remember, we saw this contrast as well when we saw the difference in Rav Yeshtetner's tshuva between opening up a yeshiva to the public versus trying to lure away or trying to get the business for yourself when a business relationship has already been established between two parties. When you're competing for public business, so that's completely okay. Or that's going to be the next part of this very long sif. But before we get there, I'd like to look at some of the commentaries on this section. So we have two opinions. And let's just take a look at the Imrei Yaakov first. Shehu nosei v'nosein imo. So we talked about where Ruvain has an established business relationship with a particular non-Jew. There's a term for this in the poskim. There's a mikri b'poskim merupia. Merupia is some kind of, maybe it sounds to me like it's a foreign word, and I'm not sure what the derivation is. But what the poskim say is you can also find a Hebrew word in that as well. Milashon ya'arfu tal, from the word ya'arfu, which is to come raining down, like dew comes down from the sky. The ya'arov kamatar, or let my words come down like rain. Shah Yisrael osek imo b'kivius. That it's almost like you look at this relationship as if it's normal patterns of rainfall, that it's something that the Jew expects to happen, just like we expect it to rain at certain times of the year, because that's what happens. And so that's the reason why, or that's the mnemonic to remember what the word merupia means. It seems to be like it's a foreign word, but they created this mnemonic to help you remember what it's all about. It's basically a relationship between a Jew and a non-Jew on a business level, and it's already established. And here's where there's this machlokas as to whether a second Jew can come along and try to take away that business. V'yesh osrin, and there are some who forbid it. When we call makom gam leda'atam eino mikri rasha kidaleel ba'ani hamahapech b'charara. He says, according to even the second opinion, which says that it's usher to try and take something that's hefker away from someone who's already started prospecting it, there we had said that you can call the guy a rasha. Like if a guy climbs up an olive tree and shakes the tree and the olives fall down, according to the more machmir opinion that we saw previously, anyone who comes to try to take those olives is called a rasha. Here we are not prepared to call the second guy who tries to disrupt the relationship that Reuven has with the goy. We don't call that person a rasha. Mishum desham ha'isek ba'kvar la'olam. Because in the previous example, when we were talking about hefker, let's say the olives that have fallen to the ground, there the merchandise is already present. It's already here in the world. Masha'in kim bazer she'eno ba'adayin. He says, here it's different because there's no real tangible merchandise here that's just waiting to be claimed by Reuven. It could be Reuven has a business relationship where he has the rights of being the first vendor that the Gentile turns to. Or when the Gentile needs to borrow money, Reuven is there to lend him the money. But there's nothing here tangible that you can say that Shimon is taking away from Reuven. It's an intangible. And because it's an intangible, Shimon is not, we are not prepared to call Shimon an evil person for stealing the business. We can say that he was acted unethically. We can say that what he did was improper, but we're not going to call him a rasha. V'yesh omrim degam bazel adasa osra mikri rasha, and there are others who disagree, and those who disagree say that no, you are allowed to call him a rasha. He quotes the Chasam Sofer, and he says the Chasam Sofer says that if Shimon goes along and disrupts Reuven's business relationship with the non-Jew, then you can't call him a rasha because he's no different from the guy who takes away the olives after the fellow who climbed the tree worked so hard to shake them off the tree. Okay.
So What about the scenario that the first money lender, the goy owes him all this money, and now you're going to come in and do a relationship with this goy, and he's going to forget about you, and you're going to lose your money that he owes you?
Well, I think that would for sure be problematic. I don't think that that's part of the scenario that's being discussed here. We assume the Gentile is going to pay his debts because Reuven has a promissory note that allows him to collect the debt in court, regardless of who's going to come.
Got some collateral.
Yeah, or he has collateral. Sure. I mean, that was typically how money lending was done. You didn't do money lending on a handshake, right? You did it with promissory notes, collateral, and all that stuff that's discussed in the Gemara. So I don't think that that's the concern. The concern is that Reuven is reliant on this goy because that's his source of income, and we see this in the real world all the time. That a guy has an established business relationship with someone. They do business informally on a handshake, but once a person has an established pattern of business with a certain individual or individuals, he becomes reliant on that for his income. And for someone to come along, another Jew in the community to come along and undercut him and to take away that business, it really hurts. It really hurts. Now, could you argue, well, it's an open market, it's free enterprise, and everyone should be able to have a shot at this because it's not established. Like, it's not like I'm taking anything away from you that's tangible. I'm just taking away future business. If you want the future business, you always got to hustle and always do better for future business. That's Shimon's argument. Shimon says, I'm able to get this merchandise from China, and I'm able to get it at a much lower price. Why shouldn't I enterprise? Why shouldn't I capitalize off of my hard work that I found a different supplier? You're getting your goods from Canada, and so that's why people have paid a higher price. I got this same product from China at a lower price. I'm able to charge a lower amount for it. So don't tell me that I'm not allowed to compete with you. In other words, there are going to be many instances where Shimon is justified in the event that he's able to provide the goods at a much lower price than what Reuven is able to do. There has to be some elasticity in this halacha to allow for different situations which are going to come up. And sometimes one small detail will change everything, both logically and ethically, right? Okay, so, and finally, well, actually, I think we'll hold it here for today because I have to get to my next year. I apologize. We will continue this halacha Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow. Okay, everybody?